They said the mountains out there could eat a whole platoon and leave nothing but silence behind. But that was before her name ever touched the air. The night the general called her forward, the base was already cracked with nerves. Too many body bags. Too many reports ending in words no one wanted to read out loud. Men who'd stopped believing in ghosts still felt something crawl up their spine when she crossed the threshold. No one knew why the tent seemed to dim when she entered. Only that conversations died mid-sentence, and even the generators outside seemed to hush, like the power itself didn't want to interrupt. She didn't look dangerous. That was the part that unsettled them most. No swagger, no weight in her footsteps, no shine in her eyes. Just the quiet of someone who'd seen things that don't echo in reports. Before we continue, tell us where in the world are you watching from? And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The general's voice wasn't supposed to waver, but something in him hesitated before he spoke, like his instincts were warning him not to say her name first. Rank meant nothing in the space between his words and her silence. He asked for her unit, her name, the surface-level details that make a soldier real. She answered with nothing but precision, and still the room felt wrong, like it wasn't built to contain whatever stood in front of them. Then he asked the only question that mattered, the one no one ever says unless they're certain the answer won't come. Call sign. 2 words, stripped of ceremony, fell from her lips like a verdict. Specter 6. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But the effect was the kind of quiet that doesn't belong to fear or respect. It belongs to recognition. Every man who'd smirked, mocked, or measured her by her frame started staring at the floor like they'd just heard something they were never meant to know. The general didn't blink, but his eyes shifted in a way that made it clear he'd heard it before, just never from the source. And long before anyone spoke again, the silence made its choice for them. They say the plywood floor never creaked when she stepped on it. Only the men did. Something in their bodies registered her before their eyes did, like prey feeling the shadow before the hawk touches ground. Nobody remembers the exact moment the laughter stopped. They only remember realizing, too late, that it already had. Cigarettes hovered half an inch from lips. Dice games froze mid-roll. Even the radio static seemed to hold its breath. Someone swears the temperature dropped 3 degrees in under a minute, but the thermostat on the wall was malfunctioning the day the report was filed. It always is, in these stories. Ask the ones who were deployed in Kunar, in Fallujah, in the districts where the dirt drinks blood faster than the medics can wipe it away. A few of them will admit, quietly, only when they think nobody is recording, that she arrived in that impossible window, after the comms went dead, but before the first bird hit the LZ. They don't use her name because they never had one to use. They describe her like an aftershock, felt, not seen, and proof that something worse had already happened. A Marine once tried to post about her on a throwaway Reddit account at 3 in the morning. The thread was gone before sunrise. His account, too. The cached version stayed up for exactly 46 minutes before it broke into a 404, like nothing had ever been there. What nobody wants to admit out loud is that silence has a shape, and in that tent, it walked in wearing boots and no insignia. The general, 3 tours, 2 reconstructed knees, a voice like gravel dragged across metal, looked at her the way a man looks at a file he thought was burned years ago. He called her forward with this careful, deliberate neutrality, like he was trying not to step on a landmine he'd planted himself. The others say his tone wasn't commanding. It was preventative, like he needed to convince the room he was still the one who got to ask the questions. Their bodies reacted before their thoughts did. You can track a secret's weight by posture alone. Shoulders squared, eyes averted, jaws unclenched to hide tension. Nobody saluted. Nobody spoke. Nobody cleared their throat or shifted their stance. They didn't look at her, but they didn't look away either. It was the reflex of someone who has learned, at some point and at some cost, that witnessing is permission. There are specialists, quiet ones, the kind who study negotiations, hostage reactions, psyops drills, who will tell you that silence after a phrase or a face isn't confusion. It's recognition. It's a muscle memory of survival. It means the mind has heard something it remembers, but can't admit to knowing. Something pre-cleared, pre-classified, pre-denied. They don't file that under awe. They file it under compliance. If you ask the ones who were there what they felt, really felt, they won't call it admiration. They'll call it what it was. A shared moment of remembering something they spent years trying to forget. A blackout scar in the brain. The kind you only discover when someone else presses a finger against it. You can hear it in the way they pause mid-sentence, the way they leave gaps where nouns should be, the way they insist they don't know who she was, but they still won't repeat her description. Some say the fear comes from not knowing what she is. Others say the fear comes from knowing exactly what that means. He asked like a man throwing a dart at a map, expecting to miss, expecting the silence to prove his point for him. The room was still trying to remember how to breathe when the general's voice cut across the quiet, low and deliberate, meant to anchor them back in the chain of command. Call sign. It wasn't a question. It was a warning dressed as procedure. A reminder that names, ranks, and designations were his to invoke and theirs to obey. But she didn't wait for permission to exist. She said it without flourish, without hesitation, without that performative edge most operators get when the room is watching. 2 words. No emphasis, no apology. Specter 6. Not a call sign, an admission. A re-entry into a reality everyone else had worked very hard to suppress. And something in the floor seemed to drop, not because anything moved, but because every man in that tent remembered, all at once, where he had heard it before. Some of them had seen it in write-ups they were never supposed to read. ARs dated between 2010 and 2015, pages thick with black bars where names should have been. 6 operative present, scrawled in the margins like the writer wanted to confess something but couldn't risk saying it clean. Those reports still circulate as ghost files, screenshotted, forwarded in encrypted chats, whispered about over drinks that go untouched. No attached personnel, no initials, no timestamps, just that hyphen, that number, the implication of someone who moved like a breach in protocol or the origin of it. FOIA requests have tried to drag the Specter program into daylight, but the denials always come back in the same sterile language, identical phrasing down to the punctuation. Almost like the response wasn't written, but triggered. Wrong key, wrong door, wrong universe. And yet the paper trail exists, not as confirmation, but as a shadow that suggests something taller nearby. What rattles the hardest men alive isn't what they know, but the way their bodies react before thought catches up. Separate units, separate wars, separate commands. Yet the same reaction every time the name surfaces. Eyes cut downward, breathing shallows to minimize sound. Elbows tuck in as if to make less surface area for whatever memory is about to touch them. Nobody admits to hearing it twice, because that would mean acknowledging they lived through the first time. Psychologists have names for it. Conditioned suppression, trauma-linked recall, shared survival narrative. But that language only works in rooms without history. Out here, men keep their diagnoses behind their teeth. They don't talk about the operators who show up when logistics say no one could have made it in. They don't explain why missions labeled as suicide runs ended with every man accounted for and nobody filing the report. You hear the same sentence from different mouths across different continents. We weren't supposed to make it out, but someone did something. In the bars off base, in the encrypted group chats, in the moments after too much silence and not enough whiskey, the word Specter shows up like a cold draft under a locked door. Always tied to nights when the comms were dead, the exit points were gone, and the enemy count didn't favor math. 0 casualties in no-win scenarios. No cameras, no recognition. The kind of miracles men don't celebrate because they don't know if they earned survival or were spared for reasons that don't involve them at all. Grief and awe live close together in the body. One clicks the jaw shut, the other pins the spine straight. In that tent, when she spoke those 2 words, the room didn't divide those feelings. It felt them as one thing. The memory of dying once, and the suspicion that it hadn't finished happening yet. The first report that mentioned her didn't vanish all at once. It decayed, like a body pulled under ice. A junior officer logged her presence after a night raid in Cunner, marked only as female, unidentified, non-enlisted, assisted extraction. 72 hours later, the file still existed, but the line was gone. Not redacted, not revised, erased like a sentence that had never been written, leaving the paragraph around it bruised and slightly misaligned. The officer who wrote it was quietly reassigned, then medically discharged for recurring stress fractures. He never broke a bone in his life before that. You can map her shadow by the places where death pulled back too suddenly. Kinner, Fallujah, Marja, sectors where the math said a dozen body bags minimum, but the count ended in 0 and nobody wrote down why. No 2 stories match, but they rhyme. The ambush that didn't finish closing, the alley that cleared before the smoke fell, the sniper nest that went silent 5 seconds too early. And always the same detail, spoken only when the door is locked. Somebody got there first. Cameras never survive her. The footage degrades like it was burned from the inside out. Field cams go corrupted when she crosses the frame, even if she's only a blur at the edge of the lens. Techs blame dust, sand, humidity, electromagnetic interference. The excuses stack so high they form a silhouette. Some clips don't disappear, they just skip. 1 second of static in the exact moment a sixth figure appears between the 5 soldiers accounted for. The clip resumes in time to catch the sound of breathing that doesn't belong to anyone who was debriefed later. Medics tell the clearest lies. They say the wounded were dropped at the tent entrance by a runner, or a local, or someone from 2nd Platoon. Except no one in 2nd Platoon was uninjured enough to carry 2 men out of the firestorm and vanish without signing. One medic, retired now, living in a cabin that isn't on any county map, said he once tried to follow her after she laid a corporal with a chest wound on his cot. Didn't see where she went, he said. Just felt like I'd already been told not to. Logs don't bend around her, they fail around her. Timestamps drift. Coordinates mismatch by miles. Extraction windows list helicopter landings that pilots swear never launched. One operation in Marja shows 2 overlapping mission reports. One where the squad was pinned for 3 hours. One where they were out in 40 minutes with no casualties. Both are signed. Neither mentions how. Even the rumors don't know whether to fear her or worship her. The language shifts depending on who's speaking and how much blood was on their uniform when she arrived. Some say she appears before the fighting starts, not after, like she's there to choose who gets to walk out. A corporal from Fallujah, drunk enough to forget caution but not memory. Put it this way, you don't see her show up. You realize she was already there. Survival is easy to celebrate from a distance, but the ones still awake at 3 a.m. don't toast it. They examine it like shrapnel lodged too close to the heart. They count the seconds where they should have died and circle the blank spaces where explanation should live. And in those blank spaces, guilt starts to sound a lot like gratitude spoken through clenched teeth. Her name doesn't disappear. Disappearance would be too neat. Instead, it rots from the inside out. Files don't get deleted. They get shortened, blurred, misaligned. An audio log drops 3 seconds exactly where someone mentions a woman no one can identify. A personnel roster skips a line number like it was never meant to count that high. Chain of command charts don't remove her. They rearrange themselves so she was never in the room they're now insisting never existed. It's not censorship. It's gaslighting with administrative teeth. In 2016, someone filed a FOIA request that came back colder than expected. The response didn't deny her. It denied the concept of permission itself. Specter, 6 classification, not authorized. No explanation, no appeal, no clarification. Attached page counts were missing, like even the absence needed redaction. Lawyers who handle national security paperwork said they'd never seen phrasing that admits nothing while warning everything. The message was clear. You didn't request something classified. You requested something you're not allowed to know exists. The people who speak her name on record don't stay on record. 3 officers, all from different branches, different continents, different years, ended their careers the same way. Voluntary retirement after post-contact debriefs where they introduced a detail nobody asked for. One tried to bring it up twice. He was reassigned before he got the sentence out the second time. His exit file doesn't list cause. His medical records start the same month the paperwork ends. The dates almost overlap, but not quite. That gap is where the pattern breathes. Digital trails don't vanish cleanly either. Archived.org mirrors of certain military pages used to list unnamed female operatives assigned to specialized divisions. Those pages weren't taken down. They were overwritten. You can still see the ghost text in the HTML if you know how to look. Invisible tags, leftover spacing, a blank where a name once lived. Not removed, ritualistically unacknowledged. Social media tries to erase her like mold under fresh paint. Twitter threads that mention the phrase Specter 6 get rate limited, then deleted, then shadow hidden like they embarrassed the algorithm by existing. Screenshots circulate in private messages with the usernames blurred out, not to protect the sources, but because half of them no longer exist. Like the accounts themselves were temporary vessels for a memory nobody meant to type. The most honest records are the ones not written for daylight. Old message boards, defunct forums, encrypted chat fragments. Someone always uses the same phrasing. Death waiver, non-attributed rescue, zero visibility asset. Nobody explains those terms. Nobody defines the clearance required to even repeat them. They write like they're logging dreams they weren't supposed to wake from. Paranoia doesn't stay sharp forever. Eventually, it gets tired and folds itself into routine. The men who lived long enough to notice the erasures don't fight them anymore. They just stop keeping records that can be shredded. They pass the story mouth to ear, strip it of timestamps, swap out locations, leave her unnamed. Not because they've forgotten, but because memory stored on paper is memory for sale. And some truths survive longer when everyone pretends they never learned them. They don't remember the sound of her voice as much as the moment after it. Some silences are just pauses, but this one felt dug up, older than the floorboards, older than the men standing on them, older than the ranks stitched into their sleeves. You could hear it in the way boots stopped shifting, in how no one dared clear their throat or adjust the weight of their rifles. The building didn't go quiet. The people did, like something had walked through them instead of into the room. The general didn't salute her. That would have made it ordinary, but he didn't dismiss her either. And that was worse. Men who've commanded battalions don't hesitate unless they've just recognized something that outranks language. Whatever passed between them didn't speak in protocol or chain of command. It moved in older channels. The witnesses say his expression didn't change, but his breathing did, and that's what the rest of them felt. The involuntary reaction of a man who thought he was in control of the story until the story turned to look at him. Across units, across continents, across years, the reaction barely changes. You can chart it like weather. Shoulders drop half an inch. Eyes go anywhere but forward. Hands that were curled around rifle straps loosen like the body is trying to make itself smaller. No one raises a weapon. No one salutes. They just break eye contact with a ghost that hasn't vanished yet. It's not fear in the traditional sense. It's recognition without permission. Survivors say the name only gets spoken once per deployment. Not by rule, but by instinct. One person says it, and nobody repeats it. Not because of superstition, but because repeating it would make it real twice. There's an unspoken agreement. The first utterance summons memory, and the second might summon her. Even the men who don't believe in anything they can't reload won't say it twice. They don't test doors they aren't sure they've closed. Look at their equipment, and the truth shows up like a watermark. Under the tape, under the scuffs, etched into the wood of rifle stocks and the inside of helmet shells, S6. Not written like graffiti, carved like a contract. Some add it next to the names of the dead. Some carve it where only their scalp will ever feel it. They won't tell you why, but the pattern explains itself. Insurance is only valuable if you believe in the threat. The reports that never made it past oral retelling always start with the same condition. Comms cut, leadership out of earshot, no overhead guidance, no exfil window. She doesn't arrive in the middle of operations. She arrives when operations have already failed and someone forgot to declare it. It's like she's tied to collapse the way medics are tied to blood. Some men think she belongs to the moment the mission slips out of command and into myth. No one writes down the final theory, but you can hear it in the way they avoid saying what she saved them from. They don't think she's the one being hidden. They think they are. That whatever Specter 6 is, it existed before the files, before the wars, before the acronyms, and they were the ones temporarily brought into its orbit. Myths are exaggerated. Censorship doesn't bother exaggerating anything. It just waits for the witnesses to stop trying to tell the story out loud.